Hi there. Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. My name is Kerry Cranston. I'm the president here at the American Writers Museum, and I'm happy to welcome you all here on this sunny, gorgeous afternoon in Chicago. And before we get started, I want to cover a few quick things. I also want to note that we have a number of people live online listening to our program, and we want to welcome you as well. If any of you are new to the American Writers Museum, you can become a member and receive free admission to all our permanent and special exhibits, as well as discounted tickets to events like this and our new monthly happy hour series, Get Lit, as well as advance notice of special programs and new initiatives. You can see the staff at the front desk if you're interested in finding out more before you leave today. Some of you may already have your copies of The People's Tongue. If you don't yet have a copy, you can get yours from our bookseller in the back, Seminary Co-op, or online from the link we'll post in the events chat if you're online with us today. Speaking of our friends online, if you have any questions for our presenters, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll have a little time at the end of the program for questions and may read yours out loud. We'll pass a mic around for those of you here in the room. So put your questions together. I want to thank everyone for being here and for valuing the past, present, and future of American writing. The book, In the People's Tongue, America's History with the English Language, is intertwined with music. From the earliest poems written before America had a name to the most skilled and modern hip-hop artists, the anthology celebrates the sound of our voices raised to tell our stories. To begin today's program, I'd like to welcome musicians Paquito D'Rivera and Farid Haque, whose jazz artistry echoes the innovation and improvisation of American English. Please help me in welcoming our special guests.
Hello, everyone. Do you remember the name of Dizzy Gillespie? Yeah, he was a Puerto Rican guitar player. Oh. So if we ask you what is the most famous composition written by Dizzy Gillespie, what do you answer? Tunisia, a night in Tunisia. Yeah, and if I do this, what you do?
Salt peanuts.
I love Chicago, man.
Salt peanuts.
Boom. Boom. Let's try a different key.
Salt peanuts. Salt peanuts.
Go for it. A nightmare in Tunisia.
salt peanuts.
Thank you.
Hey,
How about fun, right?
Hello, everybody.
estoy trabajando.
I think maybe, Karen, you want to come in here? Breaking the pattern here.
Thank you,
Take
guys.
over.
So thank you both for that wonderful intro. And I'd like to welcome to the stage the editor of The People's Tongue, Ilan Stavans, publisher of restless books, and a consultant to the Oxford English Dictionary, as well as one of the AWM's earliest advisors. And I also want to welcome to a member of the AWM board, Carolyn Curiel, former United States Ambassador to Belize, editorial board member of the New York Times, and senior assistant to President Bill Clinton. Please help me in welcoming Ilan Stavans and Carolyn Curiel.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be in this, what I feel is my home. I saw this museum start from the very beginning, and it has evolved and it has created an entire community. It's a marvelous temple to celebrate the written and the spoken word as they connect to what it means to be an American writer. And what it means to be an American writer is also connected with what it means to be an American musician and simply an American in general. And one of the great pleasures of editing this book, The People's Tongue, Americans and the English Language, has been the opportunity of going to different cities and talking with incredible people about what it means to connect with the English language, relate to it, how the English language defines them, how they define the English language, spoken word poets and high school writers and teachers and translators and dictionary makers and activists and politicians and you name it. And this is another opportunity to do so. We're going to engage in a free-flowing conversation about the English language in a variety of ways. Then we're going to open it to the audience, both present, visible, and invisible, lurking on Zoom, looking at us like the CIA. I'm going to start, Carolyn, with you, if I may. I'm fascinated by, if I can do this, I'm fascinated with the idea of ghost writers. The sheer concept of becoming a ghost when you are writing for somebody else, that is, you can write the autobiography of a baseball player or a movie star, and your name shows up in very small letters at the very bottom of the page, of the title page, of the cover, but they are not your words, supposedly, though you wrote everything, and speechwriters for different politicians, and you were a speechwriter for President Clinton. What does it tell us a little bit about what it means to be the one that puts words into a political figure of that dimension? Is this a big responsibility? Are they your words, his words?
Sometimes, yes. A combination of all of the above. Depended on the speech. Some very deep policy, deep dives. Some policy wasn't formed yet, and I had to make it up as I went along because I knew what policy should be for that administration. And if not, dang it, I was leaving. No, not really. But I did have a voice at the table in a way that most people are not fortunate to have, and so that was a happy thing. But as I mentioned earlier to my three new friends here, I really enjoyed writing comedy for Bill Clinton. Because everything else was just deadly serious. And he's not a funny guy. I know you find it hard to believe. He has a really good nature about him, one of the kindest people I think that's probably ever occupied that office. But he had to do comedy because for some reason in the United States, the leader of the free world has to do comedy, and he better well be funny, otherwise he's going to get bad press, right? So his first event, and I had only been with the administration for a month, maybe less, and he had to do the radio TV correspondence dinner in Washington, D.C. There were only 3 speechwriters for the most loquacious president in U.S. history. Everybody else before him, recent presidents, had had at least 9 and up to a dozen, maybe a little bit more. There were only 3 of us because they were economizing, which is not where you want to go to economize. But so I raised my hand and I took the assignment and I ran with it. I love comedy. I was telling Ilan earlier, I feel that my English would not have turned out the way it did, except for the fact that I loved comedy on TV. I Love Lucy, Dick Van Dyke Show, I'm there. So I learned idioms and everything else that I wouldn't have learned at home. So I put together a comedy routine. It went really well. Next morning, the headlines were, "The president is funny." Who knew? Also wrote some comedy for Al Gore, and that's a whole different story I won't get into because it's a longer story, and I know we have a lot of territory to cover here. But the president called me from Air Force One after the radio TV correspondence dinner, and he said, "Pretty funny stuff, Carolyn." And I said, "Thank you, sir." And he says, "So what are you going to do for the gridiron?" It was on Saturday. If you don't know what the gridiron is, picture the Academy Awards with not as attractive people. I'm just saying, Washington has been called that. So all the power brokers in Washington, D.C., everybody in all phases, diplomacy, journalism, you name it, they are there. It's not the nerd prom, which is what the other banquets are called. This one is white tie and tails. And so the president asked me what I was going to do, but I had a bunch of speeches I had to write between the time I was talking to him and Saturday, and I didn't have time to do more comedy. So I said, "Keep your lips warm for the saxophone." And I couldn't believe I said that to the president of the United States. And there was a pause, and he says, "Okay, I will." And so he shows up at the gridiron, and in a surprise move, puts on sequin black tie and tails, or white tie and black tails, and does yakety yak, don't talk back in his saxophone. So I appreciate the role of music in communication. Also, the guy I wrote for before him, you may recognize the name, Ted Koppel, also musical.
Yeah.
He could sing. He sounded like Crosby, Bing, or David, depending on the mood. So that was fun. On the serious side, it was, you have to fight the fascination, Ilan. If you're writing for the president on a very serious topic, and I did a lot of serious topics for him, affirmative action and race relations among them, some gut-wrenching, really gut-wrenching stuff. And you have to be able to step back from it and be a little dispassionate, even as you know you're going to be hitting some emotions in the speech.
And do you need to study his syntax, his way of using the language with an accent, the cadences of the language, in order to deliver something to him that will make him feel comfortable? And as such, are you a kind of, I don't know, a vampire of entering somebody else's world? I don't know, it's not a good image. You take it for wherever you want to take it.
I'm thinking Invasion of the Body Snatcher, maybe?
Something like that, maybe.
So, interestingly, so I was working for Ted Koppel at Nightline for the entire 92 year during the campaign. At that time, I had no idea I'd end up working for the president. I was under contract to Koppel, but I was listening to him very intently because I would have to write about what the candidate Clinton was up to, and the other candidate too, of course. And I got some flavor of it, and I could see that there would be challenges when I got the offer to become a speechwriter. But what we did was, the 3 speechwriters decided we need samples of what he did in Arkansas with his speeches. Scary stuff. They went on and on and on, his speeches. You will recall the convention of 1988, like that. And so I thought, oh, he can't do that as president. So our job, the 3 of us, And we eventually became 5, I think. But the 3 of us had to figure out how to keep everything in bounds. And we found out that that was only limitedly successful. I accompanied him to Long Beach, California for a speech on trade, another serious issue. And a heckler won the battle with the president. He heckled him 3 times in a row. The first 2 times the president went back to the script. The 3rd time it was done. The heckler got an impromptu speech. None of my stuff went in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the saxophone, Paquito, as a bridge. No, I know you don't, but you have your clarinet. And I know that you have a very intimate relationship with those 2 instruments, the clarinet and the saxophone.
I have no choice. I have to pay my rent. So.
And I wonder, you want me to bring it up a little bit? The mic?
Oh, this is
It's fine. I wonder. Ahí está.
There you go.
I wonder if the clarinet and the sax speak a different language.
totally different. They are connected. The saxophone is a direct descendant of the clarinet. This is the oldest instrument. And it's usually this is just one part. But usually clarinet has 5 parts. The mouthpiece, the barrel, the first body, second body, and the bell. It's a very complicated instrument sometimes. You never know what she's thinking. And I say, it's a girl, you know. You be very careful, very gently, because she can become very complicated. And the great Frank West played great saxophone and great clarinet too. He said that the clarinet was invented by 5 men that never met. Yeah, because the lower body has nothing to do with the upper lower. It's a pain in the neck. I recommend that you pick up something else, not the clarinet. But yeah, they are related, but they are like cousins.
Yeah.
But the saxophone is a more reasonable instrument.
Reasonable. What do you mean?
There is not such a thing as an easy instrument. There is not such a thing. Even the kazoo, you know, in order to play, you know, in a decent way, it's difficult to be good. But it made more sense, you know. You leave the saxophone for 6 months and then you pick it up and it's sound. The clarinet, no. The clarinet, you leave it there. That happened to me. I check it out. Oh, it sounds good. You leave it in the stand, and when you pick it up, then you do this. Very good. You leave it there, and you blah 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 blah, and then you pick it up again, and shit. And you never know why.
Yeah.
No, that is the difference between one instrument and the other.
The way you were describing the clarinet made me think of Isaac Bashevis Singer, a Yiddish writer who won the Nobel Prize in 1978, who we have all these beautiful typewriters in the back, and you and I were toying with them and joking about them. And Bashevis Singer used to say that he needed something similar, that he needed to protect the typewriter, caress it, and give it all the love, because it was the typewriter who wrote his stories. He was only the force that came in.
The instrument.
The instrument. Do you have a different relationship with this instrument, depending on the mood of the day, what you're going through? Do you wrestle with the instruments more in certain days than in others?
Especially with the reed. This instrument is nothing without the reed. It's like there is no guitar without. Well, at least the guitar you can use it as a drum or something, no? You can blah blah blah, but not with this one here. So the reed is the most important, and it's very temperamental too. Not all the reeds are created equal.
Yeah.
Not at all. So the relation with the reed is problematic, but you know, we are all reed players are masochists. They enjoy it, you know, being suffering a little bit.
Farid, tell me about your relationship with the guitar. How did you come to it? What kind of language does it have for you? How does it communicate?
The guitar is a very a devious mistress, because
You're going to get some help here.
she's also
Devious Mistress.
Raise it up. There we go. Because, you know,
There you go.
beautiful, beautiful. The instrument is very changeable. And what you notice, I mean, I have a heritage. My mother is from Chile, and the guitar, of course, is a huge influence in all of South America. My father's from Pakistan, and guitar-like instruments, the sitar, the sarod, have a huge influence musically over there. And now, you know, the guitar as well is a very popular instrument in India. There's an interesting story. The guitar, there was a craze, let me get this right. There was a pedal steel guitar craze in Hawaii. And apparently one Hawaiian pedal steel guitar player moved to the Portuguese part of India and took his pedal steel guitar with him. And all the Indian sitar players say, we want to do that. So then they invented the Mahatravina, which is a pedal steel guitar, jazz guitar that's been turned into a kind of a sitar. And so the guitar has, you know, evolved into the banjo, the mandolin, all the American instruments. And so I looked at the guitar, you know, for me as a connection to my heritage. Mm. It was the one thing that I could look at all of my heritage. And you know, people always ask me, you know, Fareed, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from Chicago. And they say, no, but where are you really from? I say, hey, Chicago, because this is a melting pot. And in a way, I realized that through my experience on the south side of Chicago with the jam sessions, I got connected to the idea of the blues. And the blues is something that's common in all styles of music. We call it duende, we call it saudade, but it's the blues in there, right? And there's that. Right, it has that whine to it, and you find that in Arabic music. You know, you find that in Chinese music. You find it everywhere. So the blues kind of was a connection, and the guitar was that connection for me. The guitar, you know, I can take this instrument and play. Right, I can suddenly be a white European, and then I can. I'm in Spain. So, you know, the guitar takes you all over the world, and it's been the only thing that helped me make sense out of my life.
Well,
There is only one Fareed Haque, you know, and that's him.
Beautiful, Fareed. Paquito, when putting together this book, I often thought of the many conversations that you and I have had over the years, sometimes on stage, often in front of a good meal, and I often thought about your really extraordinary capacity to improvise, the act and art of making music that doesn't have notes in front of you. You just travel in different directions, which is what jazz musicians do so beautifully. Because I find that the beauty of American English is that it comes from different parts of society, and that it is so improvisational, so impromptu. So, Paquito, what is it that I don't know? I want you to talk a little bit about how you improvise. What do you feel when you improvise?
I have a theory that anyone can improvise. Some people have a block, about improvising, and then they are terrorized. Some classical musicians, when you take away the paper, they don't know really what to do.
Yeah.
Well, there is some other musicians that you put a piece of paper and they don't know what to do. You are supposed to be able to improvise, just in case. You never know when you're going to be not able to read the paper, that. But talking about American music is a reflection of American society against the opinion of some crazy characters that we know. This is a country of immigrants, and the result is the music, this wonderful musical jazz music, which is a combination of many elements. The contribution of Africans, Spanish, European in general, and Caribbean people to jazz music. You cannot talk about jazz music if you don't talk about people like Tito Puente, or Machito, or Chico Farrell, or Michel Camilo, or Dave Valentin. Because the contribution of the illegal aliens to the music of this country have been monumental, And an example of that is Dizzy Gillespie, who was one of the first big names to mix the elements of Cuban and Brazilian music into the mainstream of jazz music. The first piece we're talking about to you about, now that we are talking about language and the English language and all that. I remember the first time I went to the stage with Dizzy, my English was even worse than now, believe it or not. And then we went with his quartet. This is in Montreal, Canada. And I said, Dizzy, what are we going to play? And he says something like, it sounds like a Cambodian hungry buffalo or something. Then I asked Ed Cherry, was the guitarist, hey Ed, what did he say? He said, who? Dizzy, what did he say? He said, I don't know. I said, you don't know? But you are American. He said, yeah, but he's from Shiro, South Carolina. That's a different planet.
So what did you end up playing?
I follow him. I improvise. I said, what can we do? He said, no, let him start playing, and then you will find out what's going to be playing. And he plays so beautiful. He was so creative, and he was so clear in his ideas.
Yeah.
He was very clear with his ideas of what, when he said, he don't mean that. Was very clear, then we follow him.
I asked you about the clarinet and the sax as two different languages, but you actually speak verbally two different languages, English and Spanish. And you write in Spanish. I've read many of your columns and short stories and sometimes also in English. What is your relationship to the two languages?
Always I love the English language because I love jazz music. And I love reading the Downbeat magazine, which is published here in Chicago. And English language is part of the jazz world. So that's why I try to understand. I never got to speak it fluently, but the good thing about jazz music is that it's the music of the musicians around the world. I think it's the music who has more festivals around the world than any other music.
Yeah.
They have jazz festival all over the place. Even in India, they have jazz festival all over the place. So that's been my relation with the English language and jazz music.
And with Spanish?
The Spanish is a language we swing,
Yeah.
It has like, it's very rhythmic.
Yeah.
In order to understand any type of music, you should learn something about the language, the country that is coming from.
Yeah. Carolyn, you are the granddaughter of immigrants?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, the granddaughter of immigrants from Mexico.
Yes.
I wonder if you can say to us something about how, I didn't ask you this before, and I hope it doesn't, but I wonder if you can ask us how the English language has changed in your lifetime, in our lifetime?
Dramatically. You almost need subtitles if you're very old and remember the old days, right? And I think that's particularly true of English, not so much Spanish, although Spanish too. But I do know that writing now for a president would be quite different. Writing for the New York Times is definitely different. What I was writing back in the early 2000s was an entirely different animal than what is being produced now. The demand is higher too, and this isn't particular to the Times, it's generally now. Quality has gone down. The guardrails have been eased at best, and language has become looser. Sometimes that's a good thing. The kind of stringent rules that we had, there was a gentleman named Al Siegel at the New York Times who had something called the greenies. He would mark up the paper in green magic marker. And if you were on a greenie, that was bad news. You did not want to be on a greenie. And I was never, that I remember anyway. I might have blocked it. But pardon me, I think that if you're writing now, you don't even need to be schooled in the way of journalism. There are so many different venues for writing and creating language and terms that didn't belong before. Terms that didn't have a basis in anything, because now, of course, we have different types of media, gadgets, ways of communicating, texts. Who likes communicating exclusively by text? No one I know of any age, because it is easily misunderstood. I just pull my hair out when somebody wants to keep going back and forth on text. I'm like, I'll call you, or later, and if that dates me, so be it. But I like to have clarity in all things. Are
you, if I'm understanding, are you saying that the English language has changed in the last, let's say, 30 years faster than in any previous time in recent memory? Is it evolving? Is it being transformed faster because of the social media, because of the looseness of society, maybe, of certain roles? Do you think the language is being transformed much faster than when you were young?
So younger.
Thank you. Sorry. So that's a good point that the language allows us to say.
Yes. So leading question, but the short answer is yes. And I will tell you that in the book, and by the way, loved this book. I think were I still teaching, it would be required reading for my university students. But the first 3 offerings in this book cover 3 centuries, right?
Yep.
It goes from the 1500s,
Yeah,
1500s, 1600s, 1700s. And we have changed so much more in 30 years than in 3 centuries, for sure. And a lot of it is technology. A lot of it is advancement, but a lot of it is retreat. Complex ideas are passing us by. The nation could default any day on its debts. Are people paying attention? Do they understand what's going on? I'm going to say, who's explaining this right now? Who's reading any explanation that is happening right now and digesting it and understanding that we can't let this continue? I don't know. And that's scary to me.
Farid, what Carolyn was saying is that language is evolving rapidly and much faster now than before, if I understood. Does jazz evolve, and has it evolved faster in the last 30 years? Can we compare it with the English language because of the practitioners, or it's not possible to talk about evolution in the same way?
Oh no, I think absolutely we can talk about the evolution of this art form. I have a working theory, which is that jazz music started out as a cultural phenomenon. But it, originally, before Louis Armstrong, there wasn't really that much improvisation in what we thought of as jazz music, right? It was arranged music. There was complexity, and there was, the use of the ear. You play by ear, and you might, harmonize a line, but the actual idea of being a featured soloist and making up your solo, that was a relatively new idea. And so jazz started out as a cultural music blend of cultures and began to turn into a process, a way of thinking about music. You could take the chords because really jazz evolved mostly based around improvisations of popular show tunes. For the most part, pretty horrible songs in many cases, love, love, oh secret love. It's about a horse, Doris Day sang it, and then Miles played it, and it was like, wow, this is an amazing song. You're like, no, actually, it's still a kind of a crappy song. But Miles did something to it that was amazing. John Coltrane played Inchworm, and you began to realize that there was a process that was happening, and that process is something that can be exported. That process, Dizzy Gillespie saw that process existed in the Caribbean islands and in Brazil. Afro-Caribbean music could embrace the process of jazz, which is, here's a song, let's understand the architecture, and now let's improvise with that architecture. This process, I believe, has been exported now all over the world. So there are Indian musicians who are embracing the process of jazz, and American musicians are like, what is going on? There are Turkish musicians, Iranian musicians, obviously European musicians, South American musicians, African musicians. I'm sure there are Indonesian and Papua New Guinean musicians playing jazz. And still this process is so powerful because it allows that culture to live. And I think many American jazz musicians feel under threat because they're uncomfortable with the idea that jazz may find an expression in another culture that is just as valid.
Interesting.
That happened already.
Yeah.
In the music of the world, they have, as I mentioned before, there is jazz festivals all over the place. And when you go to those festivals, you see people interpreting, understanding jazz in a totally different way, with the same principle, but with their own root, and that is wonderful.
Yes, it is.
That is what you play Beethoven the same way in France that you play in Oklahoma, but they don't play the same way in Santo Domingo that they play here.
Yeah.
Right. Or in Germany. European jazz is something totally different. They cannot deny the root. The root is here. It's American music, but they interpret it in some different way, and they made their own contribution to the music.
Vive la différence, right? You have to celebrate the differences as they express themselves through the culture of jazz. And that is, I think, inevitably jazz is going to infect, like the best kind of COVID, the whole world.
The kind of COVID.
The best kind, right? Everybody's going to have to be like, yeah, I don't get that, but that's
a
cool.
good analogy, yeah.
That's cool. I don't get
There's
that.
no
but
vaccine for that.
hopefully not.
You want to say something? I want to, before we open it up to the audience, again, visible and invisible, Carolyn, back to you. It's a fact that younger people are more creative when it comes to words, in spite of everything that you and I have been saying, connected with social media. And young people invent words. Young people are more progressive through language. Older people, or not so young people, tend to be much more conservative about language. Recently, at an event in LA, there were 10 people on stage. Half of them were under 30, the rest were over 30, and I asked if they could envision a world without dictionaries, an American world without dictionaries. And all the people younger than 30 said, we don't need dictionaries. Life goes on perfectly. The people above 30 said, no, we could never live without dictionaries. They are the buffer, they contain, they are the memory of the language. Thoughts about any of this?
AI.
AI.
AI. Do we need AI? Some will say yes, of course we do. Advancements will come. But if you think about AI and where it's leading, and the great thinkers who have been dealing with it, there are a lot, and I don't know how many as opposed to those on the other side, but there are a lot who think not a great idea. How do we put on guardrails for that? So the dictionary has its own guardrails. It has, for those of you who haven't read the book, you're going to see the dictionary coverage in this book is tremendous. And it brought home, when I first read the Professor and the Madman, or the Professor and the Madman, about the creation of the dictionary in England, and that just really gripped me. This had that effect plus, because it's more than just about memory. It's about, do we lose the meanings of what has lasted for so long? Reading something in Old English doesn't take away its meaning. You have to interpret it a little bit, of course, but you still get the gist. Will we get the gist? And by the way, will it be authentic? And kids are creative at writing. That's going to go away pretty soon. It already has. I remember a university back in the very early 2000s, a professor telling me that they had something to check for plagiarism. Useless now, pretty much useless. You can't tell. It's almost impossible.
I got my first, I've been teaching 30 years. This year was my 30th year at Amherst, and I got my first AI paper, but the AI student wasn't registered in the course. The real student was registered, and it was quite a shock. We're going to start with a Zoom talk, or shall we start here? We have a question here. I think the mic is going to be moving so that the people online can also hear.
Hello? Sure. Yes, that works. Okay. Thank you so much for this talk. It was really fascinating and stimulating. As one of those people who's over 30, and I am an editor, I have, they talk about losing the meaning of words. There is one word, we all know it, and it's used for everything. And to the point where nobody actually knows what that word means, or at least does not use it. And the example, when I hear somebody use a certain version of it, is, do you really feel that way about your mother? So I am certainly one that is, I really relate to what you were talking about in terms of, the loss that our children and grandchildren are going through in terms of language. I thought, what was it called? The sentence diagramming. I thought that was great fun. It was a great game. And I learned so much from it. And they don't teach that anymore. And the teachers are not knowledgeable anymore. And I think it's very, very sad what has happened to
one of the things that I try to convey in the book, and it covers 450 years of American English by the people by us. The amazing thing about English, one of the amazing things about English, is that though we have some of the best dictionaries in the world, we don't have an academy like the Académie Française or the Royal Academy of the Spanish language to protect the language. And I think it's amazing because it's truly a language of the people. We either uphold it or destroy it, and we can't blame anybody that is using our taxpayers or the monarch's money. And one of the fascinating aspects is that over this 450 years, every generation complains that English is going to the dogs, that there's no future for it. And the next generation does magic with the language. John Adams, our second president, thought if we don't have the equivalent of an Académie Française, English in America will be destroyed. And English in America is one of the most versatile languages in the world, and it's exported and it's oppressive in other parts of the world. I don't know exactly if this was the word, but the four-letter word that starts with an F is a word that was not included in the dictionary up until 1974, because it was considered that nasty words should not make it to the dictionary. And all of us, of course, when discovering sex, well, the nerds would go to the dictionary and try to find out what the word vagina means or penis, but we couldn't find the word peanuts that we found, but not the. And yet, it's an incredibly versatile again and magical word that, with four letters, can become an adverb, a noun, an adjective, and that it has been absolutely deprived of its nastiness because. I mean, everybody uses it so that you can play with it in, superb ways. So what is nasty for one generation becomes an asset for the next, and vice versa. At least that is the... There's a question right here.
Thank you for this and for the music. It's interesting to have the analogy of jazz as a common language that is exported. English has been exported globally and is a language of international business, international exchange. The question I have is when we stop having a dictionary, and I think the inclusion that has come from the young is a very good thing, to include the meanings of certain words, because many of us would have no clue about what different dialects mean when they say A, B, C, D, or, like, bless your heart. I'm sure you can Google that now and know what that means. And those, bless her heart is a phrase that means one thing, but it means another in the South. In the North, you might be saying, oh, may they be blessed. In the South, you might be saying, isn't she special with a special? So yeah. Having a dictionary that translates and shares those different interpretations of phraseology helps human communication. Do you touch on that in the book in terms of understanding the various forms of English and regional? And
oh, absolutely. The book has as we were mentioning before, some of the first letters by Noah Webster trying to articulate why we need an American dictionary of the English language that would be different from the English dictionary of the English language. What slang is, in the very thought of some folks sitting in an office, in this case in Springfield, Massachusetts, for the Merriam-Webster, deciding what words are accepted and what words are rejected. Because every dictionary, there's no such thing as an unabridged dictionary. All dictionaries are abridged. The moment you publish them, they are already insufficient. There are new words that have emerged, and somebody is legislating the what's in and what's out. And the book ends, at least the timetable ends, with the news that in 2022, the staff of Merriam-Webster had to leave the building for a week because there was an individual from Texas who came to kill them all, since they had included the word they with a different meaning. For that individual, the word they is sacrosanct and should not change from the way that it was used in the 18th century or 19th century. It's the same word, but it's a totally different word. And it's a word, words that don't evolve are words that become inefficient and useless. I don't know. Any reaction to?
If I may, I
Please.
think just really quickly, I think that if more people had more love for dictionaries and language and could express themselves, something that's becoming lost, there would be less evidence of violence. Because what is violence but an expression? And there have been movements to try to get young people especially to squash, I think that was the word, there was a quash or squash, and they would do this. This was an experiment, I think, up at Harvard. And it was effective, but it didn't spread, unfortunately. But you need people to have the words to say what they mean, what is annoying them, and then to hear and process the answers to that. We don't have that. We're losing it.
I mean, I don't want to be too much of a naysayer, but you know, my father's from Pakistan, and so you know what, we studied a little bit about Urdu, and Urdu evolved as the Persian language to try to unite the Persian Empire. So Urdu evolved as a language that used elements of Farsi, Sanskrit, so that there was a common tongue throughout the empire. English is very much the same. It's a language of colonialism. It's a language of oppression. And by trying to keep everybody to speak the same language, we do encourage communication, but we also encourage oppression. How do we find that balance? I mean, you know, languages has evolved, you know, before the printing press, there wasn't a language. You went from you know, the boot of Italy all the way to Brittany, and there was a slow evolution of the Latin language, right? So it wasn't just, you know, it was the kings who came in and said, let's make this Spanish because otherwise, so language and unity has always been a way of creating empire. So we have to figure out, and I don't have an answer, but how do we balance those things?
We're going to, one more question. I want to also echo what you were saying. There is another extraordinary dimension of American English, and that is that this is a country of immigrants. And think of all the words that the Italian immigrants have gifted us, and how the English language has expanded. All the words from Cuba, or from Mexico, or from Pakistan, or from India, from the French, from the Germans. And if you took out any of those, maybe that is reverse colonialism, the colonialism from inside, but it is an incredibly nutritive way for American English to keep on enlarging itself. When I see the tragedy that is happening in the border, I also know that the Venezuelans that are arriving right now will very soon permeate the way we speak the Spanish language in the United States and the way we speak English in 10 years, because they will move from where they are to the middle class and above and spread the wings the way other immigrant groups did. One last question, please.
Hi. Thank you. Gracias. Bahut shukriya. And I would just like to ask, because I feel like we're teetering on the edge of this question here, how you have felt language used as a gatekeeper against you, and how you feel like you might be complicit in perpetuating such gatekeeping against others who might be trying to come up, other voices of folks. And I am well over 30, I should add. But you know, I appreciate the post-colonial discussion, and as new varieties of English are being born and reclaimed, I'm very curious about your reflections on your own experiences of prescriptivist English being used against you. Thank you.
Anybody, Carolyn, you wanna take that one? Any of the jazz musicians here who want to reflect? I'm going to go for it, but I love the tension that exists between prescriptivism. I genuinely love it. The tension between prescriptivism and descriptivism. Dictionaries have oscillated between being prescriptive, that is, a dictionary feels that it has to tell people how to speak, and being descriptive, getting the people to tell the dictionary how to speak. American dictionaries, for the most part, are descriptive. French dictionaries are prescriptive. Spanish dictionaries are prescriptive. That doesn't mean that we're not prescriptive. On the opposite, that's one thing, the dictionaries. And the other one is how we use the language or not. Two academics were recently expelled from a school because they were using pronouns in their signature. Certain words that we use that can be triggers for all sorts of phobias that permeate the society. We are, as a society, are like everybody else. We use words to both contain what we feel should not be in our realm and the progressive forces within that society to open up and change the perspective. My own vision, I've been in this country 35 years, my own vision is that we're much more open to acknowledging words that were not accepted before now than in the past. But I'm also over 30, as you were saying, and my students have a very different opinion. They view the language of the older people as much more controlling than the language of the younger people. And I think that there's a big generational gap that is taking place. I don't know, however, the nature of language is the nature of who's using it. And using the language will always mean that we have fashions with words, and that those fashions are going to be out of fashion at some point, that there's going to be a new generation that will come and say, you didn't use the language in the right way. Let me show you how it is used. My son, I have two, my oldest son is a DJ. It's amazing the world, he inhabits the world of African-American DJs. And his grammar and syntax are absolutely different than mine. And he stops me often cold in the way I use my words. And sometimes I hear his words and can't recognize them either. I feel the spark and the tension between the two. And as a teacher in the classroom, of course, that happens frequently as well.
And that's jazz.
And that's jazz.
Sort of.
Yeah.
I want to end just very briefly with a poem by Emily Dickinson, who lived in Amherst, in the very same town where I live, 2 blocks away. And that is the reason why I live in Amherst. And this is one of her poems. It goes like this: a word is dead when it is said, some say. I say it just begins to live that day. Thank you. Thank you, guys.